Hi lovely people, I'm Debs. Welcome back to my channel, Rainy Read Stuff. I'm here in the book shack. Stopped raining finally, it's still a bit blowy. It's Sunday, I'm going to do my weekly reading wrap up. But first, I seem to have got some new subscribers. So hello to you. You and all my existing subscribers are really welcome. I am very grateful for you to subscribe and hopefully watch my videos. I hope you don't find it too chaotic. So yes, welcome to everybody. I seem to have tipped over the 700 mark, which is fabulous. Thank you. Anyway, you haven't come here to see me congratulate myself. What you have come here to see, I hope, is what I've been reading. So, had a couple of days away this week seeing the family. So we've just got, we have 6 books in total. Let's go through them. First of all, an audiobook, and this was Ghost Stories. It featured 4 ghost stories. The Signalman by Charles Dickens, which I have actually read before, but which I love. I think it's a great story. The Haunted Doll's House by M.R. James, which I hadn't read before. And 2 from E.F. Benson, The Room in the Tower and The Bus Conductor. I really enjoyed these. They were narrated by Andrew Sachs, who, if you're in the UK, he used to play Manuel in Fawlty Towers. I don't know whether that program was available anywhere else. It was many moons ago, many decades ago. He played a mad Spanish waiter, but he read these in English with no accent. The Signalman is one of my favourites. I really like it. The other 3, like I say, I hadn't read before. They were all great. But I think my favourite was E.F. Benson's The Room in the Tower, which was quite complicated and quite spooky. You need a little spookiness at this time of year, don't you? Another book that was an audiobook, I like to get a lot for my money out of my Audible subscription, so I tend to buy multiple books that are packaged together. And this is part 1, I think it is, of Jeeves and Wooster by P.G. Wodehouse, one of my favourite authors. I've read most of these, but what attracted me to this audiobook is it's read by Stephen Fry. And again, if anyone's ever seen the BBC series of Jeeves and Wooster from the, what would it be, 80s, 90s? I'm not sure. Hugh Laurie played Bertie Wooster, and Stephen Fry played Jeeves. And whenever I read them now, I can hear their voices. So it was great to have Stephen Fry read this book. This one is, it features one of Bertie's old school friends, all his friends, all the characters have ridiculous names. Actually, this one's called Richard Little, but they call him Bingo. Bingo Little is in love. In fact, in this book, he is in love several times. Bingo Little is also financially dependent on his very rich uncle. Sadly, he keeps annoying him to the point where he is cut off financially and has to go and search for employment. Usually, this employment involves him tutoring the obnoxious son of some landed gentry somewhere. And Bertie goes and visits him several times. He's called in as an emergency when Bingo's love life either goes horrifically wrong or he's hideously broke or something like that. This also features Bertie's cousins, Charles and Eustace, who, if anyone can get you into trouble, Charles and Eustace can. So there's a lot of fun and frolics going on in here, which includes a number of betting syndicates, because Bingo does like a flutter, and actually so does Bertie. But they're not betting on traditional things. The first betting syndicate is set up to see on a particular Sunday which vicar in the county delivers the longest sermon. The second one, they are betting on the church's annual sporting event, which features things like egg and spoon races and sack races, etc., etc. There's a lot of hilarity about ringers and form, and there's some cheating that's going on. But at the backdrop of this book is Bingo Little's attempt to find a wife. It also involves Bertie trying to fool Bingo's uncle that he is in fact the female author of Bertie's uncle's favourite books. As you can imagine, that's a recipe for disaster. I like the recipes for disaster in P.G. Wodehouse's books. They wouldn't be the same without them. This was so much fun, and Stephen Fry's narration is just brilliant. I think there's another 5 books in this bundle that I bought, so I'll look forward to reading those at some point. It's Occult Detective October this month. It's organised by MJ at Reading This Life. I am one of the co-hosts. Last year for Occult Detective October, I read a book called Beyond the Grave by R.W. Wallace. I had an e-copy of it. I still have an e-copy of it. I acquired the other 3 in the series, and the first week of October, I accidentally read book 4. I don't know how I managed to do that when I had books 1, 2, and 3, but I obviously opened the wrong one. Read book 4, got partway through it and thinking, not sure I remember that. And there was a reason that I didn't remember. It's because I hadn't read it. This week I read book 2. This was called Unveiling the Past. And I'm very prone to reading books, a series of books out of order. Most of the time it doesn't really matter. With this one it sort of does. The story is there are 2 ghosts. One is called Clotilde, and her gravestone just says her Christian name and her date of death. And she was murdered, but her death was judged as suicide. Emmeline Evian is a detective from Paris, and she has been sent to Toulouse to try and tie in a number of suicides that are suspected to have been murders. So she, with permission from the family, gets Clotilde's body removed, only to find a detective who has been missing for 30 years has also been murdered, and his body has been unceremoniously dumped on top of Clotilde's in the grave. Anyway, for the last 30 years, these 2 have been haunting the graveyard. They have unfinished business. They want to know who killed them. Emmeline is particularly sensitive to ghosts, and these 2 discover that they can influence what she does. So when their bodies are taken to the morgue for examination and another post-mortem, they persuade her to stick 2 of their smallest finger bones in her pocket, which she then turns into a bracelet and wears pretty much constantly. In this way, the ghosts who have been confined to the graveyard can choose to separate themselves from their main body and be attached to the bones that the detective has. That enables them to leave the graveyard and assist in the investigation. So in book 2, we go a bit further into finding out what's been going on, because a number of people have actually been murdered, and the majority of them appear to have been women, young women, who were politically active in some way. And it becomes obvious that there's some sort of larger event at play here. And the 2 ghosts are trying to help Detective Evian look at the wider picture. Now, this fits in with the 3rd week prompt, which was a diverse author or character. Emmeline is gay. Her partner is Moroccan. And the other 2 are ghosts. So that's pretty diverse. Also for Occult Detective October, and another one that fits the diversity box, I read this. Ben Aaronovitch, Foxglove Summer. This is the next in the Rivers of London series. I absolutely love these books. This one isn't set in London. I read a short novella a couple of weeks ago where actually it was in Germany, although they were mentioning the characters in this, it was the German version of the police department that dealt with the occult. In this one, we're back with Peter Grant, who is a PC, and he is a member of the very, very small unit that deals with affairs of the occult. And 2 girls have gone missing in Hertfordshire. And Peter feels that there may be something of the occult involved in their disappearance. So he goes and offers his services. Most police departments aren't very pleased to see him because they prefer the straightforward crimes. They don't really want ghosts and weird entities involved in their crimes. Beverly Brooke, who is one of the Rivers of London, she and Peter have a sort of on-off love affair. She goes to Hereford to help him. He didn't ask her. She just turns up following the river stream. This involves the Fae. It involves large unicorns who, contrary to your fairy tales, aren't that friendly. They're a bit huge. And they use their horns to try and skewer people. I love these books. I think they're fabulous. They're great fun. They're a real romp through ridiculousness. There's a lot of humour in them. I like the characters. Again, they tick the diversity box. Peter Grant is the son of Sierra Leonean parents. In London, that doesn't prove any hindrance to him at all. In rural North Hertfordshire, it does. And he is partnered in Hertfordshire with a detective who is gay and is wondering whether or not to marry his lover, who is a farmer. Fabulous fun. If you haven't read the Rivers of London series, I heartily recommend them. Just don't take them too seriously because they're meant to be fun. Also, Victober, I read this, The Warden. Last year for Victober, the group read was The Way We Live Now. I'd never read any Trollope before, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And it was a big, thick book. I decided I wanted to read the Barchester Chronicles. This is the first one of those. It's, you know, as Trollope books go, it's not enormous. I loved this. I had the same sort of problem with it as I did with The Way We Live Now, in that I don't think he doesn't open his books with a bang. But once you get through the first, or from my personal point of view, once I get through the first couple of pages, his characters are so fabulous that you're just drawn into their lives and you really care about what's going to happen to them. And in this one, we have an elderly priest. He is the warden of an ancient bequeathed hospital for elderly and bereft men. And he has 12 residents living in this hospital that has been bequeathed to the church for this purpose. And he lives in a very nice house. He's much loved by these residents. He looks after them. They receive board, lodgings, clothing, and a small stipend to for whatever else they want. And then a Mr. Bold pops up, and he has decided that the terms of the will that originally set up this hospital, and by hospital it's sort of like a retirement home, it's not a hospital as in medical things go on there. But anyway, Bold has decided that under the terms of the will, the money that the residents receive should be much higher. Whereas the warden, who is paid through the fund, but that is administered by the church, whereas the warden's income has gone up to an outrageous £800 a year, the money paid to the residents hasn't and should. And so, despite the fact that he wants to marry the warden's daughter, he sets off on a mission to get these 12 men their dues. He wants them to receive at least £100 a year. And so he instigates court proceedings. The trouble is, Mr. Harding, the warden, is just a lovely man who doesn't want any trouble. He really, really looks after these men. And all of a sudden, he's thrown into a complete turmoil, thinking that everybody thinks he's trying to fleece them, when actually he's just receiving the money that the church gives him. He didn't ask for that amount of money. He didn't ask for his nice house. And he doesn't know what to do. His great friend is the bishop, an elderly bishop. The archdeacon is the bishop's son, but is also Mr. Harding's son-in-law. And he has another daughter at home living with him, who Mr. Bold thought he was going to marry. But obviously, taking the church to court to get more money for these men ends up with Mr. Harding being pilloried in the press, which doesn't really please the daughter. I really want to read the rest of the Barchester Chronicles now, and I picked up at a charity shop maybe a month ago, 7 other Trollope novels that I'd like to get to at some point. Now, I'm saving the best till last. This final book has been on my, I've had it for ages, absolutely ages. It's by Max Porter, and the first book I read by Max Porter was called Grief is the Thing with Feathers, and I loved it. This is called Lanny, and I thought it was nothing short of spectacular. Max Porter writes speculative fiction, I suppose. He won the Dylan Thomas Prize for Grief is the Thing with Feathers. This is very different in that this is much more folksy. It's about the earth and ancient things and how we interact with nature and how nature interacts with people. The characters in here include a character called Dead Papa Toothwort. And he is an ancient being, a folk figure, a natural, born of the trees and earth, and he's a legend in the village, although, people believe him, don't believe him, depending on their views. The text is interesting because these curly bits here, those are Dead Papa Toothwort listening to conversations from the humans who are inhabiting this village. And he picks up little bits of them here and there, snippets of conversations. At the centre of this book, we have a young boy called Lanny. And the book is in several sections. It might be 4, it might be 3. In the first section, each subsection is narrated by someone who has something to do with Lanny. So it's either narrated by Lanny's mum or Lanny's dad or a character called Pete. And Pete lives in the village and is an aging artist who was really quite famous in his heyday. And Lanny's mum asks Pete if he would teach Lanny about art. Now, Lanny is a strange young lad. He makes up songs. He sees things and hears things that other people don't necessarily see or hear. But he and Pete strike up this fabulous rapport. And the first section of the book is about that. Interspersed with Dead Papa Toothwort doing his thing, wandering around the village, unseen by everybody, listening to people's conversations, and just being him. Now, in the second section, things really up a pace. Lanny goes missing. Nobody knows where he is. And there's a witch hunt for Pete, who people presume has done something dreadful to him. Then they turn on parents and say they've been too free with him, they've let him run wild. The police arrest Pete. But this section is the section I think I enjoyed the most. In this section, things are divided up by these little crosses, and you don't really know who is narrating because it's all in the first person and it jumps from character to character. And the effect of this is to really up the pace of the novel, and it just draws you in, and you're rattling through these things as they discuss, as you know, each narrator discusses Pete or the parents, or it's the parents discussing the villagers, or it's the searchers trying to find Lanny, and days go by and they still haven't found him. But it really thunders along. That second section really thunders along. The third section returns to normal prose, but there's much more of a folk, almost supernatural element to it. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed this book. It was absolutely superb. And if that sort of speculative fiction appeals to you, read it, because it's brilliant, brilliant. At the moment, I don't know what I'm going to read next week. There's a couple of things I do know, actually. I've got a couple of occult detective October books that were sent to me by the wonderful Dave Brzezinski from Occult Detective magazine that I have promised I will review during Occult Detective October. I am midway through one of those at the moment, so I've got 1.5 of those to read. I also want to finish Vanity Fair, and then the world is my oyster. So whatever it is, I'm sure it'll be fun. I've got a full reading week this week because I'm not going away anywhere. So yeah, lots of things to read. Happy reading to all of you. I hope you're reading fabulous stuff. Let me know. Let me know in the comments what you're reading. If you've read any of these books, if you've read Lanny, discuss it with me. When I finish this book, I wanted to tell someone. I wanted to tell someone how brilliant I thought it was. And the only person I knew who had read this book was Alex from Alex Unabridged. So I had to text him and say, oh my God, I've just finished Lanny and it was brilliant. But if you've read it, let me know what you thought. Thank you very much for popping by. It's lovely to see you, and I shall speak to you again soon. Like and subscribe if you'd like to. That's always fun. Leave me a comment. Thanks for watching. I'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.